It's 1700 GMT, and this is Joy News Prime live on the Joy News channel. Coming up, the Ghana cedi is on its wobbling knees as it has now depreciated to 12 cedi to $1. As the dollar nears the 12 cedi mark, economists are blaming its free fall on governments increasing borrowing of dollars from the domestic market to satisfy its international debt obligation. We'll hear from expert and a former finance minister on how to salvage the rate of cedi depreciation.
To behave like middle-income countries and put these buffers in place. We saw what the sinking fund did for us.
Meanwhile, the Institute for Energy Security has a gloomy prediction: fuel prices to go up again on Sunday, following a rise in cost on the international market and the slumping value of the cedi.
On the international market, we see petroleum products, petrol, diesel, all experiencing some price hikes due to the increase in price of oil, where we saw for Brent crude international benchmark price increased by some 1.82%.
Galamsey is now a big sin, and religious leaders are drawing millions of followers to mount pressure on government to deal with it.
We are leading the fight. The fight is in the four phases. First, repenting, accepting our challenges. The church making sure that we tell the people that it's wrong, and finally coming out to protest in our numbers.
The men of God have been to Galamsey's side to see for themselves the extent of devastation. We'll get you an update. Tonight, we'll have business and sports all within this hour. Beverly, what should we expect in business?
The Finance Ministry begins engagement with civil society organizations on 2023 budget amid IMF negotiations.
Of course, there are various suggestions that we are hearing. So we'll find a way to incorporate that into the broader government financial program for the year 2023.
Well, what is coming up in sports?
Well, the Ghana Premier League will remain suspended after a human rights court in Accra granted Ashanti Gold permission to file supplementary affidavit.
Telecotory injunction. A council for GFA forcefully opposed that prayer.
Now, this is the home of independent, fearless, and credible journalism. Stay with us for details. Apologies for the hitch there. Now, the Ghana cedi continues to depreciate against the United States dollar. The cedi began this week at 11 cedis to $1. The cedi has today breached the 12 cedi mark to the dollar within just a week, selling at 12 cedis, 10 pesos at most forex bureaus on the retail market. Some forex bureaus indicate that most of the operators are selling the dollar for more than 12 cedis. They claim supply of dollars has reduced significantly. Again, the cedi is losing grounds quickly against the pound and euro. While the pound is going for about 12 cedis, 70 pesos, 1 euro is selling at 11 cedis, 10 pesos. Isaac Kofi J of our research desk has been visiting some forex bureaus and joins us via Zoom with his findings. Now, Kofi, what did you find at the forex bureaus you visited, and what's about the happening at the interbank level?
Right, so we visited a number of forex bureaus, and you can have a sense that most of these forex bureaus are selling $1 to a cedi about 12 cedis, 20 pesos, and these are some of the major market leaders in this the forex markets. But there are also some other bureaus selling still at 1 cedis, 20 pesos. And so that's the average. We have majority of the forex bureaus selling at 12 cedis. 20 pesos.
Now, there are concerns that the government's demand for dollars for interest payment is putting a lot of pressure on the cedi. How about that?
Well, first, so if you look at the interbank level, for instance, you can still see that the cedi is still trading at 10 cedis, 70 pesos for those who are actually buying, and then 10 cedis, 72 pesos for those selling. And now on the question of interest payments putting pressure on the dollar. So currently, if you look at us as a country, we are projecting to spend close to 37 billion cedis on interest payments alone. And if you look at this component, you have about foreign components being about 28 billion Ghana cedis, and then domestic component being about 25.5 billion Ghana cedis. Now, if you are paying your debt or interest payment or amortization to your foreign counterparts, I'm not sure you'll be paying in cedis. You'll certainly be paying in dollars. So, Bank of Ghana is also actually demanding the dollar to also pay interest payment as well. The recent, auction that they had, we actually saw that demand actually outstripped supply by over some $75 million in the market. And so going to December, we actually projected that the dollar to the cedi will be about 12 cedis, but we are currently in October and we are still seeing some forex bureaus selling $1 to about 12 cedis, 20 pesos.
So that's my colleague Kofi Ajay here. Now let's speak to head of the Insight team at IC Group, Courage Mate, for more on this. Now, Courage, thank you so much for joining us on Zoom on this interaction. What is accounting for the differences in the dollar exchange and what is the way to cure it?
A very good evening to you. I'm Courage Boti. I work with GCB Capital as the lead researcher there. So as a point of correction, now to your question, what is accounting for the cedi's free fall? In fact, a lot of things, but I think it is chiefly amongst them weak sentiment at this point in time and the general macroeconomic uncertainty. That means that investors do not know what the next steps will be. There have been talks about debt restructuring. Preceding that, the IMF hinted last year during the Article 4 consultation and the report that came thereafter that yes, we spent to, if you like, recover the economy from COVID, but it came at a huge fiscal cost. That means that we need to deploy macroprudential policies going forward to be able to bring back, the economy to where it ought to be, the strength it ought to have, and ensure that sustainability. Those calls, I guess, were not heeded. And then so 2022 budget did not exactly assure investors. And I guess that is why from September last year, we've seen decline in investor holding, offshore investor holding of domestic bonds, and that has continued all through. It's a big part of why the cedi fell sharply in the first quarter. It's a big part of why it fell again in the third quarter. And those risks now have kind of more or less crystallized, where we are in a position where interest payment alone, cost of goods and services, and the wages and salaries is consuming about 130+% of total tax revenue, really. At such instance, investors will be concerned that can government be able to meet the debt obligations to them? Is the reason we've had the credit risk downgrades and the repatriations have been sustained all through. I think it's a reason. I looked at some data not long ago, and I realized that the total offshore investor holding of domestic bonds at somewhere September last year stood at about 134 or so billion thereabout. As we speak, in fact, 34 billion thereabout. As we speak, it's about 17 billion. About half of the total holding kind of have been repatriated within the period, and it's because of the uncertainty we have currently prevailing, really. And with these things continuing, the fact that for the last two local currency bond auctions that matured, you realize that the government was unable to raise money on the market to roll them over, which means they have to resort to the central bank for some financing or sort to try to roll over some of these bonds. It increases the risk that what if they are not able to find money from internal sources to pay the next maturity? And then you have talks about debt restructuring that there is no certainty about. So anyone who has money in their hands and want to invest now will be thinking of buying cedi, because that is what most people are doing, buying the dollars instead of going to buy some bonds, because you're not sure about what will be the treatment on debt.
Grateful, Courage, for your time here. Now, still on the economy, consumers will have to adjust their budgets more as the Institute for Energy Security, IES, predict another increase in the prices of petroleum products on Sunday. The Institute says oil marketing companies will initiate the changes on Sunday following a rise in prices on the international market and a continued depreciation of the cedi. Now, customers will pay between 7 to 12% more for petrol and diesel and about 4% for LPG on Sunday. Let's listen to research analyst with the IES, Fritz Moses.
IES's analysis of the first pricing window of October points to an expected increase in the prices of petroleum products at the various pumps for the rest of the month of October. Now, on the local fuel markets, the data analyzed predict or saw on the national average that price per liter rose to some 11.05 cedis per liter. That's an increase of about 1.36% over the last pricing window's figure of 10.90 cedis per liter. For gas oil, prices also decreased by some 3.25%, falling from 14.45 cedis to the per liter to 13.98 cedis per liter. On the international market, we see petroleum products, petrol, diesel, all experiencing some price hikes due to the increase in price of oil, where we saw for Brent crude international benchmark price increased by some 1.82%. Aside that too, of course, for the various finished products itself, petrol on the international market or gasoline rose sharply by some 15.72% from its initial price of about $833.68 per metric ton to an end date price of 964.75 metric ton. Gas oil also experienced another sharp increase in price also by some 9.60% from its earlier price of $1,001.05 per metric ton to close the window at $1,097.18 per metric ton.
Now, in a related development, the Ghana Private Road Transport Union, GPRTU, is also seeking a 40% increment in transport fares. The union has been pushing for an increment for months, but was denied the go-ahead because of economic challenges. But the union says they can no longer endure the high cost of business. They are meeting the Transport Ministry and other stakeholders on Monday to pitch their concerns for an agreement. Samuel Amwa is the communications director of the GPRTU, and he joins us live on Zoom. Now, it is clear that the economy is in turmoil, but is 40% not over the top? What does it entail? Kindly unmute so we can follow what you're telling us, sir.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Very clear, sir.
All right, thank you very much. Yes, we are coming out with 40% or more this time around based on where the components that we use to run our businesses are. You know, the four major components that we use to run our businesses are the petroleum products, the lubricant, the spare parts, and the taxes, DVLA taxes, insurance, and other assembly taxes. Let me take you back a little bit when we had our 20% increment way back in May. By then, the diesel was about 11.20 when we had that 20% increment. By then, also, the lubricants were increased by 20%. Then the taxes, the DVLA taxes were increased by 15%. Then by then also the dollar rate was about 8.2. That was when we had our 20% increment. Now, checking on where these components are now. Now, diesel as it stands now is about 13.98, of which is likely to go up, hopefully by Sunday, it's likely to go up to about 15 or more. And then also the lubricant is being increased by 30%. Now, dollar rate now stands at, I think about 11.2 now. And the spare parts goes up based on the dollar rate, because when they use the dollar to go and purchase their stuff, they come and they charge by how much the dollar is. That is why looking at all these things that we are coming out with, initially we were thinking of even 40%. But then it's just, came to our notice that the diesel is going to go up in the next pricing window. Maybe by Sunday, it will go up to about 15, cedis per liter. And then we started thinking of this increment way back in July. Okay. July, we were supposed to increase. We didn't do that. August, September, and up to this November, to this October.
That's fine, but obviously, this is not the first time you are raising a matter like this. What happens should the Transport Ministry reject the 40% and over that you are predicting?
Yes, we are not just going there we are not just going to mention any percentage without explaining to them why we are coming out with this. Yes, we know there is economic hardship in the country now, but we cannot continue to run at a loss. Now go to stations and find out from the drivers how what they are going through now.
No, so upon all your explanation, if the ministry says no, what will you do?
Yes, we will agree to that, because we also put it to the ministry that yes, per how much the components are gotten now, we cannot also squeeze ourselves like that. So if it happens like that, then maybe we have to come out with ourselves, like the way we did last May by coming out with our own 20%, because we cannot be running at a loss all the time.
So you would increase the fares even if the ministry says no? Is that it? Is it a yes or no? Will you increase the fares?
That is when they begin to postpone our meetings like they did the other time.
Okay. All right. I'm grateful to you for joining us here. Now, to our No to Galamsey campaign, a rallying cry from the pulpit as church leaders sound the alarm bell on the harmful impact of galamsey and rallying their members to play a role in eliminating the menace. Over the last few weeks, Joy News' documentary, Distraction for Gold, has reignited public debate on the illegal mining and put a spotlight on government's effort at protecting the environment.
To believe a forest here, and this is still an active site given some of the activities that is still ongoing here. You can see this washing machine very much active. It looks as if it rained not long ago. The reason you don't have people here, but there's an excavator as well here, about 3 of them I have counted, if I'm not wrong. This is also one of the major sources of water for the communities downstream here, but it seems that they have used this sand here to block it so that they can go ahead and mine the gold that they are looking for. That is, if there's any here at all. This is exactly what the Christian Council is trying to assess whilst they visit Epinaman deep inside the forest.
Just the heart bleeding. It's so worrying, and it's a concern to all of us. If you see this and what has gone on, the environment destroyed, and there is nothing that can be done here after they have even left. And that is why we are showing concern and telling every Ghanaian to rise up. Wherever you are and whatever your status and position, we should all stand up and say no to galamsey.
I see this is a human problem, so human beings can solve it. Where there is a will, human beings can solve it. So some people are not willing. Those people, they have to be sought for, brought them, sit them down, and cause them. Those who are not willing should be caused to be willing. That is what I'm talking about, leadership. But human beings, there's nothing that we can destroy, and there's nothing that we can build. Now that we have destroyed this, if there is a will for us to build, when we sit down, we will build. It seems a complex a complex issue, but we also need complex approach to be able to deal with this. So the approach should be multifaceted. When we sit down and Ghanaians put their mind to this, it can be solved.
I'm struggling to find a diplomatic word for what has happened. I can't find it. So let me use the word as I say it. This is environmental rape. It's not a time to pass the blame. You should have done, all of us.
So join the discussion on all our platforms with the hashtag #NoToGalamsey. Arba Kumsin is up next with Editorial.
And earlier today, the announcement of the sacking of the UK's first black Chancellor of the Exchequer, Kwesi Kwarteng, reverberated around the world. It was shocking, but not surprising because many saw it coming. So, British Prime Minister Liz Truss fired her good friend Kweku Kwarteng, ultimately for taking decisions that hurt the UK economy. He supervised the implementation of the biggest UK tax cuts in decades, which caused the pound to plummet, which then aggravated the British people, hence his party's decision to let him go. Now, Kwesi Kwarteng is the equivalent of our Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta. In fact, in this picture, you see them sitting side by side at one of the global financial meetings. So the conversation that has naturally come up in the wake of Kwesi Kwarteng's dismissal for mismanaging the UK economy is that the same rule should apply to our Finance Minister. In fact, this is not the first time calls for Mr. Ofori-Atta's sacking has come up. Since the middle of this year, several economic experts, as well as members of the general public, and of course the governing party's political opponents, have long called for his sacking.
Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, I don't know whether he has any respect for the word credibility and its value and what you do with, including the Honorable Minister of Finance. They would have done what is needful. I doubt if they can correct their mess. So they better start packing to get out of office.
But of course, the minister insists he cannot go, as that would amount to a father abandoning his children.
That's not a very good question. You know, it's almost like telling a father to resign from his children because he's changed his mind. You know, there are times that decisions have to be made for the survival of a country, and therefore if circumstances such as COVID or Ukraine war occur, which are not typical, it does change the environment.
But, of course, what else would you expect him to say? He has the backing of the president, who is convinced Mr. Ofori-Atta has what it takes to turn the fortunes of the country around. But what they fail to realize is that not many people are fortunate to have time on their side as they grapple with the impact of the harsh economic climate. On top of the high debt levels we are confronted with, inflation is at an all-time high in 2 decades at 37.2%. What this means, in simple terms, is that if you had 100 cedis at the beginning of the year, yes, in January 2022, the value of that same money can buy you less goods. By now, you know that the Ghana cedi hit 11 to the dollar mark within just a week. So within a week, it has lost more than 6% value to the dollar. So imagine all the importers and traders who have to exchange cedis with dollars to purchase items to sell. To cushion themselves, what they do is they pass the cost down to the consumer. Imagine buying a small bag of rice at 100 cedis last week, only for the price to change when you return to your neighborhood shop or market the next week. That's how dire the situation is. It's affecting people's purchasing power. And just when you thought it couldn't get worse, brace yourself, because fuel prices are set to go up. Oh yes, and we all know what a rippling effect that has. So we are all feeling the pinch every day. And guess what? In all of this, salaries haven't changed much. A lot of people are still depending on their existing incomes in this current economic climate. And it will get worse. The finance minister himself says so. After we secure a program with the IMF, government will roll out some austerity measures to set the economy back on track. So it will get worse. There are those who argue that there's no point in crying over spilt milk or looking back. Well, that's true to some extent. But as a popular saying goes, sometimes you have to look back to move forward. So here's a reminder to the managers of our economy as they look forward to turning around our fortunes.
Patients are suffering, students are suffering, traders are suffering, pensioners are suffering, drivers are suffering, contractors are suffering, civil servants are suffering, and farmers are suffering. Fishermen are suffering, and industries are suffering. Artisans are suffering, and Kayaye are suffering. The disabled are suffering, and men are suffering. Women are suffering, and children and Ghanaians as a whole are suffering.
Beverly Broom joins us now with business.
Now let's take a look at the details. Government has begun consultation with stakeholders and civil society organizations towards the 2023 budget statement, which will be influenced by an agreement with the International Monetary Fund. The meeting is part of processes by the Finance Ministry to ensure that all important input from citizens are captured in the budget. Deputy Minister for Finance, John Kuma, has been explaining to Joy Business that although the budget will cover most of the IMF programs, stakeholders must also be heard.
According to Deputy Minister of Finance, Dr. John Kuma, an input from all stakeholders is needed to develop a financial plan for the next year amid a global economic crisis. He believes the engagement with stakeholders is critical as Ghana awaits the outcome of negotiations with the International Monetary Fund, IMF.
The IMF engagement is a very important component in terms of preparing for the 2023 budget. But that notwithstanding, we also want to hear from the public and from our various stakeholders their expectation on how, especially the current difficult global environment, should be managed in our current circumstances. Of course, there are various suggestions that we are hearing. So we'll find a way to incorporate that into the broader government financial program for the year 2023.
Dr. Kumar admits there would be difficulties as government prepares next year's budget.
Well, where we are now, there will be no solution without tightening our belt because we are in tight situation. And the only way you stop digging when you are in a hole, the only way you stop going deeper when you are in a hole is to stop digging. And once you're stopping or cutting down your expenditures, obviously we are going to be faced with some difficult situations. So we must all live up to that reality that we are not in normal times.
Inputs from the various organizations will be part of government's short to medium-term budget planning.
Away from that, the government has received 10 million euros from the European Union to support food security in the country. This follows the adverse impact of the Russia-Ukraine conflict on the economy. The financial support is expected to complement the government's flagship program, Planting for Food and Jobs. Speaking at the handing over ceremony of the facility, the deputy of the European Union head, Peter Smith-Van, said the gesture is to support Ghana's agric value chain in the wake of global uncertainty.
This support, ma'am, will help 19 countries to cope with the consequences of the war, notably the food security crisis and related economic shock. And of this envelope, I'm glad to announce the EU is allocating 10 million euros to Ghana, and we will sign the check, the symbolic check, of course, in due course. As my colleague was saying, outside it's raining, and here it will be raining money also for the food security. The new funding comes on top of our 203 million euro joint programming support already dedicated to Ghana for the time 2021-2024. So what are we going to do concretely? These funds will support families to grow crops so they can generate income and make food readily available and affordable on local markets. The action will also promote climate-smart and ecological approaches in a number of agribusiness, including soybean, beekeeping, vegetables. As it caters to the most vulnerable populations, very important to us, the action will focus on Ghana's northern regions. In general, the EU and its member states are long-standing and strong partner to the agriculture sector in Ghana.
On the stock market this week, we saw activities in 21 equities and 1 exchange-traded fund. Total volumes traded fell by 20% week on week, whilst values traded rose greatly by 98%. MTN Ghana recorded 82% of volumes traded as New Gold ETF dominated values traded by 95.6%. The GSE Composite Index fell slightly to a year-to-date of negative 11.79%, while the Financial Stock Index also lost grounds to close at a year-to-date of negative 3.89% on the back of GCB. GCB remained the sole loser this week by losing 5 pesos to close at 3.95 Ghana cedis per share. New Gold ETF again remained the biggest gainer, recording a 5.6% jump to close at 191.6 Ghana cedis. The Trust Bank Gambia followed by gaining 2 pesos to close at 50 pesos per share. For next week, we should expect more activities in MTN and New Gold ETF.
And that's all for business. My name is Beverly Broom. Up next, the sports.
Welcome to Prime Sports with me, Razak Musbao. And let's start off with the Ghana Premier League, which will remain suspended after an Accra High Court today granted Ashanti Gold an extension of time to file a supplementary affidavit for the application for injunction case against the Ghana Football Association. The judge, Barbara Tete Chawe, despite striking out Ashanti Gold's initial request for a supplementary affidavit, granted the minors Monday, October 7, to apply for leave to file. Both parties will return to court next Thursday, October 20, for determination of the supplementary affidavit request. Lawyer for Ashanti Gold, Edward Sam Crab, has been speaking to Joy Sports on this development.
We are of the considered opinion and brought to the court's attention that the facts or the content of the supplementary affidavit are germane, to our case, and it provides material facts that this court ought to look at, and to ensure substantive justice, over what we call procedural law. We urged the court to grant us the opportunity to come properly with the leave to file the supplementary affidavit in support of the motion for interlocutory injunction. A counsel for GFA forcefully opposed that prayer, saying that the GFA is losing at this moment, and for that matter, the court ought not to grant us that leave to file the supplementary affidavit.
Well, Ghana Premier League side had to folk women in action against Malian side AS Bamako on Sunday in the second round of the CAF Confederations Cup at the Accra Sports Stadium. We'll bring you details of that story in our later bulletins. But elsewhere in Germany, because Bayern Munich will be without striker Jamal Musiala when they face Freiburg in this weekend's German Bundesliga encounter. Now, DWTV's Chris Harrington has been analyzing the situation.
Sensation Jamal Musiala from Bayern Munich. He's tested positive for COVID-19. He was one of the young players that's come out and said he was vaccinated. Of course, I think that's, the norm these days. So it's a question of how long, he'll be out for. But I know Goretzka, who netted a goal in their Classica, he had contracted COVID during the international break and he was back. So, all reports are that Jamal Musiala is doing well. He's isolating at home, but he is one piece that is definitely needed, at Bayern Munich and their success. Other players are going to have to step up, but Jamal Musiala has proven himself to be a very important piece to Bayern Munich this season, and they'll need him to be healthy, I think, in my opinion, if they want to climb that mountain and successfully defend their title.
Well, let's take a look at the fixtures in the German Bundesliga and elsewhere in the European top flight there. And you can see in the German Bundesliga, FC Schalke 04 will be playing Hoffenheim, and Frankfurt will take on Bayer Leverkusen. Werder Bremen will play Mainz 05. VfB Stuttgart will play Bochum, and Wolfsburg will be in action against Borussia Mönchengladbach. Leipzig will play in Hertha Berlin, and on Sunday it's going to be FC Cologne against Augsburg, and Union Berlin will play Borussia Dortmund, and Bayern Munich will take on Daniel Kofičar's Freiburg there. Elsewhere in the English Premier League, Brentford will play in Brighton Hove Albion. That game is ongoing at the moment, and Saturday Leicester City will play Crystal Palace. Fulham will play Bournemouth. Wolves will play Nottingham Forest. Tottenham Hotspur will play Everton. Quite a very cagey game there. And Aston Villa will be at home against Chelsea. But Leeds United will host Arsenal, and Manchester United will play Newcastle United. But Southampton will play West Ham, and the big one on Sunday is Liverpool versus Manchester City there. But elsewhere, also in the Spanish La Liga, Rayo Vallecano already underway against Getafe. Girona play Cadiz. Valencia will play Elche. Mallorca will play Sevilla. Atletico Atletico Bilbao will play Atletico Madrid. But Celta Vigo and Real Sociedad will play on Sunday. And the big one, Real Madrid versus Barcelona there, of course. And in the French League A, Strasbourg already underway. Lorient will play Reims. Lens will play Montpellier. Toulouse and Angers will play Auxerre and Nice. Nantes and Brest. Stade Rennais and Lyon will play. Troyes and Ajaccio will play. And Monaco and Clermont will play. But Paris Saint-Germain will be playing against Marseille. Very big fixtures coming up this weekend over there. But also, just running through in the Italian Serie A, Empoli will play Monza. Torino will play Juventus. Atalanta and Sassuolo will be in action. Inter Milan and Salernitana will play. And Lazio and Udinese. Spezia, Cremonese, Napoli and Bologna, Hellas Verona and AC Milan, and Sampdoria and Roma will be in action. And finally, Lecce and Fiorentina will play all on Monday there. That's where we draw the curtains on today's edition of Prime Sports. With me, Razak Musbao.
That's all we have in the bulletin for today. There's more news on myjoyonline.com. Please do enjoy the rest of our programs and have a blessed weekend. My name is Samuel Kojo. Good evening.